inaugurations. If it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. We know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America, your global pit stop for the latest news and headlines from the United States and around the world. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We'll get you a roundup of all the day's top stories, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin orders nuclear drills for his troops in regions near Ukraine. Moscow deploys tactical nuclear weapons as part of the exercise. Chinese President Xi Jinping meets French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris. Macron urges China to cooperate with Europe on the war in Ukraine. The United States and the Philippines hold live fire drills in the South China Sea. Beijing urges Manila to halt all military activity amid heightened tensions. The Central African nation of Chad goes to the polls in the first presidential election in 3 decades. The vote marks the Sahel region's first democratic elections after a series of coups. And Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to reportedly visit Pakistan this month. A 50-member Saudi delegation, along with 35 companies, will take part in agreements worth $5 billion. We begin in the Middle East. Today, as Israel marked Holocaust Memorial Day, it came under a dual attack, with Hezbollah firing rockets from the north and Hamas launching rockets from the south. Both Hezbollah and Hamas claim responsibility for the attacks. The two Iran-backed groups say they launched the attacks in retaliation to Israeli airstrikes over the weekend. Meanwhile, Israel confirmed that it intercepted most rockets fired in the north by Hezbollah. However, in the south, 4 Israeli soldiers were killed, with over 11 injured as Hamas attacked from the southern Gaza city of Rafah. Now, Israel says that it has responded to both Hezbollah and Hamas with airstrikes. And Israel has also ordered the evacuation of eastern parts of Rafah, sending tens of thousands of Palestinians into a state of panic. The Israeli army has designated specific humanitarian zones where Palestinians can now take refuge. Israel says that the relocation of the Palestinians within the city would be followed by a ground invasion in Rafah. Now, Israel has justified its plan to invade Rafah, claiming that Hamas does not intend on agreeing to the latest ceasefire proposal.
We identified alarming signs that Hamas actually does not intend to go to any agreement with us. This means actions in Rafah and the entire Gaza Strip in the very near future.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused Hamas of deliberately stalling the ceasefire talks by refusing to release 40 hostages as demanded by Israel.
Contrary to these publications, it is Hamas that is preventing the release of our hostages. We are working in every possible way to free the hostages. It's our top priority. Israel has been and still is ready for a pause in the fighting in order to free our hostages. But while Israel has shown willingness, Hamas remains entrenched in its extreme positions. First among them, the demand to remove all our forces from the Gaza Strip, end the war, and leave Hamas in power. The state of Israel cannot accept that. Therefore, Israel will not agree to Hamas's demands, which would mean surrender. It will continue fighting until all of its objectives are achieved.
Now, Hamas says that the ceasefire talks are nearing a collapse as Israel refuses to accept a complete withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. And the Iran-backed group also says that it does not trust the United States with the ceasefire deal. Hamas added that Washington would allow Israel to operate against the group and its leaders even if a truce was agreed upon. With neither Prime Minister Netanyahu nor Hamas agreeing to a truce, the ceasefire agreement is far from being a done deal. And as Israel announces military preparations for entering Rafah, the plight of over 1 million Palestinian civilians is likely to get worse in the coming days. And here in the United States, Friday marked another intense day for Donald Trump's historic criminal trial, with testimony from consummate insider and one-time confidant Hope Hicks. And in typical Trump fashion, at the close of the day's testimony, the ex-president launched another scathing attack at President Joe Biden. After reaching his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, Donald Trump made some grave allegations against the Biden administration. The presumptive Republican nominee accused President Biden of running a Gestapo administration, referring to the secret police force of Nazi Germany. Trump also complained that he was being purposely targeted by President Biden and the Democrats with multiple criminal prosecutions.
The radical left, they've been after us for years and they've destroyed people's lives. They've gone out and hired lawyers, they've been with lawyers for years, been sucked dry. And it's a shame. It's a shame what they've done to this country. And it's a shame what they've done to a lot of great people that have been absolutely ruined and destroyed, not only here, all over. These are vicious, vicious, radical left lunatics. The DA here, he saw us back. They shouldn't be wasting time on this. Look what they do to so many people. They're all lawyered up. That's all they do, lawyer up. In the meantime, you can't do anything in the country. The country's going to hell.
The president's campaign hit back at Donald Trump for equating the Biden administration to Nazi Germany's Gestapo force. And a spokesperson for the Democrats' campaign called Donald Trump's comments divisive and an insult to Jews who faced the Holocaust. Now, when asked for a response, Donald Trump and his team did what they do best: deny and deflect. In fact, after accusing President Biden of overseeing the so-called political witch hunt, Donald Trump once again called him out over his foreign policy.
It's a terrible, terrible thing happening in our country. And hopefully, November 5th, the most important day in the history of our country, in my opinion, that's called Election Day. Hopefully it's going to change, because these people are destroying our country, whether at the border, whether the horrible reports that came out today are jobs numbers, with all you hear, whether inflation, which is destroying us, a lousy economy, Afghanistan, allowing Russia to attack Ukraine, would have never happened. Then you take October 7th in Israel, that would have never happened. But I just have to say, we have a country to build. We have to rebuild it. Our country has gone to hell. We're a nation in decline. And we cannot let that happen to the USA. Thank you very much.
Now, amid these attacks, President Biden returned to the campaign trail in North Carolina. An opinion polls from the weekend show Biden leading Trump with likely voters. The ABC News poll shows Biden ahead 49-45, and NPR Marist poll show Biden ahead 52-47. Both significant as they show Biden over 50% or near 50%, a number Biden hasn't seen since the early days of his presidency. Now, Biden's increased campaign schedule combined with Trump off the campaign trail due to his trial appears to be having an impact with likely voters. With 6 months to go, the race for the White House is seeing ebbs and flows, but it appears Biden is taking advantage of Trump's legal entanglements. But we've seen Donald Trump rise from the ashes many times before, and with the mercurial ex-president, always expect the unexpected. And moving to South America, Guyana's tax agency has sued U.S.-based oil giant Exxon Mobil. Guyana says that one of Exxon's suppliers inflated the value of oil well equipment by 200 times to over $12 billion. Now, the company says it was a clerical mistake and no one suffered any losses. So why is the overvaluation such a big deal for Guyana? Our next report explains.
The South American nation of Guyana is taking Exxon Mobil Corporation to court. Guyana's tax agency has issued a summons to the US-based oil giant. This comes after one of the company's suppliers claimed it mistakenly inflated the value of oil well equipment by 200 times. According to the Guyana Revenue Authority, the charges stem from a declaration made in November last year. Rams Logistics, a Trinidad-based company, made the declaration on behalf of Exxon. The firm acted as the broker for Exxon's imported oil well equipment, and while the equipment was valued at $4.4 million, Rams declared to customs that it was valued at over $12 billion. Now, Exxon and Rams say the overvaluation occurred due to a clerical error, which denoted the sum in US dollars instead of Guyanese dollars. A Guyanese dollar is worth about 1/2 of a US cent. So why is this inflated declaration such a big deal for Guyana? Because it would have had a significant impact on its oil profits. Under the country's production sharing contract with Exxon, the government only receives its share after costs are deducted. The deal currently allows Exxon to deduct 75% of the revenues earned towards cost recovery or repaying the investments by the company. The remaining 25% is then shared with Guyana as profit. This means the South American nation receives 12.5% of profit along with 2% royalty. Exxon's country manager in Guyana said that the error was caught early and nobody suffered any losses. He added that the oil giant has updated its procedures to make sure this mistake won't be repeated. Meanwhile, Rams has called the error unfortunate, saying there were some issues with its system which would be resolved. This isn't the first time that Rams Logistics has been involved in a case of false declaration. Back in 2022, Guyana instituted 10 charges in a court for false declarations made by the company. In April 2023, Rams stated that it had been cleared of all charges brought by Guyana's tax agency. Now, Guyanese Vice President Bharat Jagdeo says that the country's tax agency will check all the invoices for the past several years. This is to check whether there were other overstatements in the past. Exxon has agreed to comply with the audit. Guyana has become one of the fastest growing oil-producing countries. It reportedly produces around 650,000 barrels of oil every day, up from zero just 5 years ago. Last year, it unveiled a new production sharing model to increase its share of oil wealth and attract new producers. In January, Guyana said it expects to receive some $2.1 billion from oil exports and $320 million from royalties this year. Clearly, big money is tied to Guyana's oil reserves, which makes it even more evident why Guyana would take Exxon to court. Because the South American nation now heavily depends on oil profits, and Georgetown can't afford these so-called clerical errors.
And shifting focus to the migrant crisis in the United Kingdom, Rwanda says it cannot guarantee how many migrants it will take as part of the UK's deportation scheme. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has promised that illegal migrants arriving in the UK will be sent to Rwanda and will not be allowed to claim asylum in Britain. However, the East African nation now says it cannot give assurances that the estimated 52,000 asylum seekers would in fact be accepted. Instead, Rwanda says the number could be much smaller and just in the thousands. Now, London signed the 5-year deportation deal with the Rwandan government in 2022, and it became law last month. The cost of deporting the asylum seekers from the UK is estimated to be more than $322 million already. According to the agreement, migrants who arrive in the UK via irregular routes will be sent on a one-way flight to Rwanda. These deported migrants will have their asylum claims processed in Rwanda, and if successful, they would be granted refugee status in the country. Now, if unsuccessful, they could apply to settle in Rwanda or seek asylum in another safe third country. Now, Rwanda's government has already set up initial accommodation that can take up to 200 people, and it also started discussions with other facilities around the capital city of Kigali to welcome more migrants. Last month, Sunak said the first flight for Rwanda would leave in 10 to 12 weeks and that there would be multiple flights a month through the summer and beyond.
So we will not be giving away sensitive operational detail which could hinder all the progress made to date. Teams across government need to be able to get on and deliver without interference. They are working flat out to deliver this genuine game changer. The first flight will leave in 10 to 12 weeks. Now, of course, that is later than we wanted, but we have always been clear that processing will take time, and the success of this deterrent doesn't rest on one flight alone. It rests on the relentless, continual process of successfully and permanently removing people to Rwanda with a regular rhythm of multiple flights every month over the summer and beyond until the boats are stopped.
Now, Rwanda says it doesn't know if it will accommodate all of the people in the UK's current backlog. The country says the number will depend on how many factors that are still being worked out. So, will Prime Minister Sunak be able to send migrants to Rwanda, or will his ambitious deal get stuck, just like the future of the asylum seekers coming to Britain? And tragic news out of Mexico. People in the popular tourist city of Ensenada are marching on the streets demanding safety and protection. Over the weekend, authorities identified bodies of 3 young men found in a well. The 3 tourists, 2 Australians and 1 American, were shot in the head with their tents and car burned while on vacation. Now, an initial probe suggests the attackers wanted to steal their car partly because they wanted the tires. Our next report goes into detail on how a carjacking attempt went horribly wrong.
What was meant to be a surfing vacation on the Pacific coast took an ugly turn for 3 young tourists in Mexico's Ensenada. Last week, Australian brothers 33-year-old Callum and 30-year-old Jack Robinson, along with 30-year-old American Carter Rode, went missing in Mexico's Baja California state. A pre-booked accommodation raised an alarm after the trio failed to check in. In a few days, the authorities launched a statewide search operation. In 24 hours, they found 3 bodies at the bottom of a well. The 3 tourists were brutally killed with gunshots to the head. The attackers had burned their tents and covered the well with boards. Authorities say the bodies had been there for 5 to 7 days before they were found. A charred vehicle was also found in the area. Their bodies have now been identified by their families.
Look, I wanted to start with the frankly horrendous news that the bodies of Callum and Jake Robinson have been formally identified, as I understand it, by their parents in Mexico. We can only imagine what this ordeal has been like for them and for the loved ones of Callum and Jake. I think the whole country's heart goes out to all of their loved ones. It has been an absolutely horrendous, absolutely horrific ordeal, and our thoughts are with all of them today.
The preliminary hypothesis of the investigation is that the missing men were attacked by people who wanted to steal their car, partly because they wanted the tires. When the surfers resisted, they were shot. So far, 3 Mexican nationals have been detained. 1 has been charged for kidnapping, the other 2 for possession of crystal meth. Authorities right now are not discarding the possibility that they were linked to the crime.
We don't have the motive. We don't know what happened. Until now, we don't know what relationship they had with other people. We have 3 people related to the investigation. As I said, when we have a final result for this case, we will let you know.
Over the weekend, dozens of people gathered for a vigil to honor the 3 tourists. Surfers even put flowers on their boards and paddled about 20 meters out to the sea. But the incident has also triggered protests in the tourist city of Ensenada. People are voicing their anger and sadness at the deaths. They say the city is no longer safe, neither for tourists nor for residents.
Somos las mujeres, perdón. Y Usually it's us women, the ones who are afraid, right? And now it has happened to these 3 young men. So I feel more vulnerable. I feel that we are all more vulnerable now. I feel powerless, very angry. More than anything else, the impunity that exists in this country is what bothers me the most.
I feel angry, fed up, and sad at the same time that you can't have these beautiful places anymore because you don't feel safe. I have a family, and part of what I like to do is to take my children to these places, to camp, to have a good time, to fish.
It attracted attention because it was an international issue. Had it been someone local, maybe the police wouldn't have investigated. That is a reality. It is a concern, and you know that very well.
We had something in common. We are surfers. We are women and we would sometimes like to surf alone, but we never do that because of the situation. We always have to go accompanied. I think what happened to them is just an example of the lack of safety in this state. We want to fight to feel safer.
Sunday's protest march swung the authorities into damage control mode. They say the 3 men weren't attacked because they were tourists, but that the intent was of carjacking, trying to imply that the city is still safe for tourists.
Seeing what was originally a robbery that got out of control, they tried to get rid of the corpses by throwing them into this well at a distance of between 6 and 7 kilometers from the site of the first find. This is what happened. It wasn't an attack because they were tourists, it was with the intent to steal a vehicle.
Baja California is one of Mexico's most violent states, although tourist areas like Ensenada are considered safer. The US State Department also advises Americans to reconsider travel to the state due to crime and kidnapping.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.